Hi, my name is Jessica, and today you're going to be watching my Psych in the Life assignment. So, first off, I should start off by explaining what psychology is in a whole in itself. So, psychology is the study of human behavior and mental processes. So, when we are trying to understand why humans do and behave the way they do and why they think the way they do. So today I'm going to explain 3 different ideas of psychology and how they apply to my life. First off, I'm going to start off by talking about classical conditioning. So the first type of psych in my life I have is the classical conditioning. The classical conditioning is learning associations between environmental stimuli and behavioral responses. So that means to learn a behavior due to association with a negative or a positive response. So it's 2 related or associated events that are unconditioned stimulus and unconditioned reflex. So there's 5 sections of classical conditioning. So there's unconditional stimulus, the unconditional response, the neutral stimulus, the conditional stimulus, and the conditional response. And these all have had a part in my life when I learned about the electrical socket when I was younger. So the first part of classical conditioning, unconditional stimulus. So this is the automatic natural reflex causing a response. So when I was younger, I touched the outlet while plugging something in, and I got a shock. That would be the unconditional stimulus because the shock is just naturally occurring. It just happens because of the electrical impulse. The unconditional response is the pain that I am feeling because it is unlearned, naturally occurring, is then in response to the stimulus. So the pain I'm feeling is the unconditional response, the unconditional stimulus is the shock. So neutral stimulus is it originally has no significant response associated with it. So me plugging in this plug, it had no meaning to me at all. It was plugging in and out. It had nothing, no response to it. I just didn't care. I was plugging something in. Unconditional stimulus is something that has originally no response to it, but after learning a response, such as when I plugged this in and I got a shock, and then I learned to associate plugging something in with a shock, that then becomes the conditioned stimulus. So since under the conditions I was shocked, this has now become something scary and negative for me to plug in because I'm afraid of that shock happening again. So the last part of the classical conditioning is the conditional response. So this is the learned response to the conditioned stimulus. So since I have learned that the shock causes pain whenever I plug something in, thinking of that every time that I go to plug it in, the conditioned response is whenever I go to plug something in, I stand back and I make sure I keep my fingers away from the prongs. Because due to classical conditioning, I have learned and started to associate plugging something in with the pain of the shock. So the next section of my Psych in My Life assignment is operant conditioning. This is a form of learning when an organism learns to engage in a behavior because it is reinforced. So there is 2 parts to operant conditioning. There is reinforcement, which is one type of consequence that occurs after a behavior and increases the likelihood that it will occur again. So the reinforcement means it will try to improve the likelihood that that act will occur again. So it strengthens the behavior. So punishment equals decrease and reinforcement increases. Negative reinforcement. This occurs when the response is followed by an end to a discomfort or removal of an unpleasant event. An example of this was sitting at the table when I was younger and having to finish my dinner. I wanted to go and play with my friends and my brother playing other games like video games. So to remove the unpleasant stimulus, I had to finish my dinner so I can go and play with my friends instead of sitting there in discomfort eating my food. This then reinforced me to finish my food and all my dinner. Positive reinforcement is increasing the chance of a behavior reoccurring by adding a pleasant stimulus. An example of this was when I was younger and scoring a goal in hockey. My parents would encourage me by saying we could have cake after if I had scored. The pleasant stimulus would be the cake and increasing the behavior of scoring a goal. So the second section of operant conditioning is punishment. This decreases the likelihood of a behavior reoccurring.
Positive punishment is presenting an unpleasant stimulus after a response. An example of this was when I was a child and I swore after stubbing a toe, which was not allowed. The unpleasant stimulus would be the soap, and it was presented after the undesired response of me swearing at a young age. Negative punishment is removing a stimulus after a response. An example of this was when I had a toy taken away when I was younger after hitting my brother with it. So the third part of my second life assignment is critical thinking. Critical thinking refers to a process which is thoughtfully analyzing and questioning statements and arguments and not believing everything you see on paper or on the internet or anywhere in your life. An example of this would be looking into buying my first car. I need to do some of the critical thinking guidelines. And the two I am going to focus on in this part of the video is to examine the evidence, which in this case we were examining all the paperwork that came with the car, such as the safety and e-tests, and all the safety features were in order. The second critical thinking guideline that we looked into was the considering of other interpretations, because on ads sometimes they say low mileage and in great condition, but that is not always the case. So we had to set a limit for what we believe to be a low mileage for a vehicle and look at these kinds of things when finding a new car. And that is how critical thinking has been applied to my life.
And that is how classical conditioning, operant conditioning, and two critical thinking guidelines have applied to my life. And that is how psych is in my life. Thank you for watching.